Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Exploring Brain and Mind. And I have a very special guest today. My guest is Andy Baker. He is a managing director of Able Training Support Limited. He is the creator of the Able Target System. This is trademarked. And he created over 150 courses, a lot about behavior management in different sectors. He also is the official training provider of Alzheimer's Society in the UK. He is the host of the Able to Care podcast, a must listen for everyone in social care and the care sector, education as well. And he created the book. He's author of the book Targeting the Positive. So welcome to today's podcast, Andy.
Very nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Elke.
So I had a little look at your background and I found that you studied a lot of psychology, psychotherapy, and a lot about behavior management. What got you into that direction? Was it like a life's journey that led you there, or tell me a bit about that?
I think it's a long story in many ways, in so much as when I was at school, I always wanted to be a zoologist. So I always wanted to. I was very interested in animals, but it was animal behaviour I was particularly interested in. I wanted to be David Attenborough, essentially, not just do his job, just be him. So therefore, I studied kind of biology and then drama, because those two go together to be David Attenborough. And I never really had any access to psychology. And then after a bit of a major life event where I was a victim of a crime when I was 16 years old, I found some work by a gentleman called Jeff Thompson that was a martial artist. I was a martial artist as well. I found the stuff that he'd written that was moving away from just the physicality of being a martial artist and self-defense and into the psychology of self-defense. And that kind of took me down a rabbit hole of starting to explore, in that situation where I was a victim of a crime, why did he do what he did? How did he do what he did? But also, why was my reactions what they were? And it took me down that self-exploration route. And I started to be exposed to personal development as well as psychology. And that started a kind of a love affair. So I moved over the passion to understanding animal behavior. I recognise we're just animals anyway, so moved over into the study of psychology. I didn't really do a lot with it. It was just all kind of personal study and reading books. And then I decided, I got made redundant for a job, and I decided, right, this is what I want to do now. And I really started focusing on the study of human behaviour and complex behaviours. So within the health and social care sector, kind of explored through, and at the same time as working within it, kind of expanded my knowledge and studied with a sponge for the last however many years, trying to pick up as much information as I possibly could. And I'm still doing that to this day. So yeah, I find people fascinating, and therefore it's a long-term love affair, I would say.
Very, very interesting journey it must have been. And it's what I find fascinating as well, that you kind of it's going over, you kind of focused on many different sectors. Like there seems to be a main focus on the care sector. But you also got into education and commercial settings. And do you notice any general things that applies kind of across all sectors?
Yeah, 100%, Elke. So I worked in all these different settings, some directly and some more indirectly. So whether it be, children's services and the foster care sector, all the way to kind of the elderly care and dementia care environments. All these different areas kind of had their own strategies or their own principles as far as, supporting people and managing behavior particularly. And I noticed, because I taught in these different areas as well as working in these different areas, there was just this common thread that went across the board that just tied everybody, which is people are people. The things that, although there can be differences, but that's it. Differences are universal as well, in so much as every individual is an individual. So, but also we also follow certain patterns. We also follow a similar blueprint, and therefore there's certain golden rules which kind of apply across the board. But then it's being a little bit more curious within those kind of rules to make it very specific to the individual themselves. So yeah, I just noticed there was this commonality, these principles, and that's where I started developing my training course. That kind of, rather than differentiating between these different areas, I thought, well, one course to rule them all, essentially, and then it's about understanding the people and making it person-centered within that premise. That then allows us to then support on an individual day to day. And from that, from the care sector, then I also started to notice it when I started running my own business and started taking on staff. Well, staff are exactly the same as everybody that I've been supporting in the care sector and the education sector. So then you can move it over into a corporate realm and kind of go, well, it's just people. That's it.
Interesting, yeah, but you're right. You're right. People are people, and there are commonalities, and I think a lot has to do. I'm going back to the mind thing of kind of exploring brain and mind. The theme. A lot has to do with how everyone's mind works, how their mindset is, also what their background is, their experience is from the past before you came into a certain setting. And that plays a lot of a huge role into how people behave, how they react. What do you think about that?
100%. So there's a gentleman called Tom Kitwood who developed a theory around person-centered care, or started to develop in the principle of person-centered care. And there's what's called the Kitwood equation. And the Kitwood equation basically looks, and I can never remember it all off the top of my head, but it basically, dementia equals biography plus social environment plus personality plus experiences. And it kind of just, the person we understand of having dementia has all of these other factors. And I kind of expanded that, and I just went, well, the person equals the cognitive difference or impairment, the personality, so all of these different bits, social conditioning, everything kind of add up together to make this individual. But there is still commonality. So the brain itself is still built in pretty much a similar way in every human being. There is obviously differences in different areas, whether it be through child development or deterioration or through traumatic brain injury or just neurodiversity or whatever. But there is these kind of fundamental building blocks which are pretty universal across the board, definitely. So
yeah, but there's also, we must not forget all the biological differences that could be with the brain. Or if certain neurotransmitters or hormones are not high enough or at a level where it operates well, the brain, that could cause another impact as well on people. And yeah, sometimes as well, of how much people do stimulate the brain. Sometimes when people retire, they just don't do much. They don't stimulate the brain enough, and the brain needs stimulation. It doesn't like to be doing nothing, because if you don't use it, you lose it. That, I think, that applies quite a lot with regards to the brain.
Yeah, definitely. There's an analogy I use a lot when I'm helping people to kind of understand the brain a little bit, which is the forest analogy. I don't know whether you've come across it. You may have heard me talking about it before, Elke, but so I get people to think about. So obviously our brain is made up of over, depending on figures, varies a little bit, but 80 billion individual neurons interconnecting between 100 to 1,000 individual synapses. So we've got this multitude of different connections. It is a complex system. And the only other complex system that I know well is the weather. So I always consider myself to be, from studying psychology for nearly 18 years now, a bit of similar to a fairly okay weatherman, that I can roughly know whether it's going to rain or shine, but I'll probably get it wrong on the day. But within that complex system, we can break it down into simplicity, which is every neuron pathway is like a path through a forest. Okay, it's your every skill, your ability. It takes you to your memories and your understanding and everything. When you're young, the forest is a meadow. It's not grown yet, and it's easy to create new neuron pathways. You can run around all over the place, but the pathways that you run regularly start to then, well, the grass doesn't grow there anymore. It creates that path. So that's why, about 90% of our brain is fully developed by the age of 5. That's why, for instance, if you are born in one country and there's a certain threshold where you will maintain that accent if you stay there for too long, you won't be able to lose that accent if you leave after a certain time. Before then, you've got a chance of picking up the accent in a new place. Little bits of adaptation, but it maintains more significantly because in those first 5 years, that pathway of that accent's been laid down. So it takes a lot of practice to then kind of move away from just the accent, the way you pronounce words, the way you kind of speak. So as far as the when we're young, it's kind of laid down. So riding a bike's a prime example, isn't it? Right? You ride a bike and you do it automatically. You don't need to think about it anymore. You don't need to plan it. You just do it automatically. That's a pathway now in your forest. Now, if you then don't ride your bike for years, obviously the meadow becomes a shrubland, becomes a gorseland, becomes a woodland, becomes a jungle. And the older we get, the harder it is to create new pathways, but it's so important that we're still making those new pathways. Yeah. We're still creating new skills. But learning a language when we're before the age of 5 is a lot easier than learning a language when we're in our 50s. It's not impossible. It's running through a meadow when you're 5. It's hacking through a jungle when you're 50. So yes. It's still just hard work, right?
Yeah, I like that forest analogy. Yeah, I haven't come across it before, but yeah, I heard you speak about the bit about learning the language before 5. That's maybe that's why I'm not losing my Swabian accent when I speak German.
Absolutely. But like with riding a bike, if you don't ride the bike for years, the pathway grows over a little bit. But if you get back on a bike, 20 years later, you're a bit wobbly. It's, you've got to kind of trim away the shrubs, but the path is still there.
It's still there.
And I think, as you just said, that the importance of neuroplasticity and the importance of neurogenesis, and that there's no age that we shouldn't be still working and laying those pathways down, otherwise they grow over. And if they grow over, they start to die and they start to be less effective. Or it's a case of creating new pathways to make sure that we're kind of finding workarounds to the areas that may be deteriorating and tiring over a period of time. So I think that analogy gives us that really good mentality of, the importance of, like, the brain is a muscle. You've got to exercise it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. So, yeah, with regards to behavior in leadership, I'm interested a lot in leadership and how what's the best kind of leadership. I mean, I learned about in my training towards Neuralink master practitioner. I learned a lot about like values-driven leadership and purpose-driven leadership. But if you look at leadership nowadays, what do you think is still missing with regards to leadership and behaviors for leadership?
Really good question, Elke. So I think I'm a big believer in connection before solution. So, trust and connection are some of the best ways that, we work together as a communal society and things like that. So, your typical kind of punishment reward. So a lot of the stuff I teach is moving away from the behaviorist thinking of punishment reward, like the carrot and the stick kind of principle. Because although it can work, and we have to acknowledge that, yes, it can work. I can train a dog by giving them a treat to get them to sit, and I can, the same way, people tend to work if they're getting paid, but they don't tend to work if they're not getting paid. So we do have that carrot and stick. I think sometimes, though, the sense of community. And I quite like the values driven and the, mix of values driven, purpose driven 100%. That I will try and role model the best I possibly can as far as. So, role modeling, I think social learning is a hugely impactful element. It's a bit like when a parent says, it's not do as I do, it's do as I say. But kids will do what they see, but so will staff.
Yeah.
So, they will mirror the culture around them, and the people obviously are influencing the culture. So somebody's got to be that kind of, the dominant role model within that culture, I would say. I think as far as when we're missing, some of the things that are missing on leadership, you can sort of see it. If we take the negative, what we might perceive as negative leadership from other countries that are, currently big in the media and stuff like that, where suddenly this individual that many of us kind of don't understand, why is anybody following? Why is anybody kind of connecting with? You have to kind of you have to respect, it's kind of working. And there's a reason that they are following and connecting with. And it's because he's saying the right things. He's obviously we're talking about Mr. T.
I know what you're talking about.
You have to kind of look and go, there's always an element of both sides of any kind of situation. They look at things and purely go, oh, well, I disagree with that. But you have to take what you can learn from it as much as what you disagree with.
Yeah.
Whereas the leaders in our country are really disconnected. They're not speaking in a language that anybody respects or understands or feels connected with in any way, shape or form. And I think it's partly because they don't seem to do what they say they're going to do. They don't role model necessarily. But I think there's a lack of passion in the way they speak. And I think there is one element of that Mr. T might have. I'm always careful using my name just in case any of the social media goes no. But one thing that he does have is he speaks with passion, even if we don't agree with what he's saying. It's like he tends to speak with passion. And passion is, it connects us, it drives us, it encourages us to do the same. When I'm teaching, because I'm so passionate about behavior, understanding humans and people, that's where I can get a group that turned up going, when does this finish? As far as the training sessions are concerned, into hey, I really want to know more. Where can I get more information about this? And I think that's where there's something lacking in this country from the top of the leadership. But yes. I think even in every company, that should be something as well. Is the leader of that company absolutely passionate? If they're not passionate, then nobody's going to get on board with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And I've sometimes wonder as well how, if leaders are really like adaptable and if they're ready for all the challenges that our time nowadays brings with all the technical developments, the increased digitalization, everything. There's a lot happening at once at the moment with AI coming as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm concerned about is that there will be too much focus on AI and things and more away from the human being, human interaction, human connection, and kind of with regards to the energy that it brings when you are among other humans. It's like with meetings. I know I digress kind of a little bit away, but
that's right.
With meetings, Zoom meetings are great, but you cannot beat face-to-face interaction, person-to-person interaction, because then you can kind of get the energy from the other person as well. And we so need that. And I think a lot of that has already gone lost due to what happened since March 2020. I don't use a certain word I use since March 2020.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think maybe one thing's rather than it being AI necessarily, I think one of the challenges we have is we are so goal focused or metric driven potentially in all kind of areas that it's all this kind of it's the measurables, and therefore AI has looked at, well, then I can improve my efficiency, I can improve my speed, which means then I can hit more markers, hit more KPIs, hit more metrics, whatever it is. And you get this in the health and social care sector, you get this in every kind of corporation and things like that. The problem is when we're driving, I think we sometimes forget to remember one really important metric with it, which is a sense of community, well-being, shared values, and just that general feeling of human connection. There doesn't tend to be metrics around that because it's very difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to, no school necessarily, for instance, when they're looking at the academic outcomes, they're not counting how many friends a kid has.
Yeah.
They're only making markers of how they achieved in a test. But I would say that it's more important for how's that kid's social connections. Are they feeling part of the community? Are they feeling a sense of autonomy and connection within the organisation? Because if they're not, the academic stuff probably isn't going to be as good as it should be anyway. Because nobody works as hard for an organisation, a situation they don't care about. So simply it's a case of by focusing on slightly different metrics, which should be, human connection. How often is a manager, a boss, teacher, caregiver spending time just connecting with the individuals that they're supporting or working with? That should be on their metric list. That should be a KPI measurement. I mean,
Is that not something I thought that's something that's really missing as well? That the time that they spend time with individuals, also in school settings and things.
yeah, yeah.
And because sometimes if especially if it's like special needs children, moving away to a different thing again. But thinking of school settings and how little they know. They see the children when they go in class. I've been in a school course years ago in a placement for a year when I did a school support course, and I remember that the teachers they just the children come into the classroom, then the teacher comes in, and I think that's all that they see of the kids. They don't they see maybe how they are interacting in the class, if they're doing if the child is keen to interact, or if they just sit there, or if they cause trouble a lot. They just see the kids in that kind of setting, but they don't know really anything about the kid.
Yeah. It's and it's a bit chicken and egg in some ways, Elke, as far as so when you're looking, obviously going back to the focus of your podcast, which is mind and the brain.
Yeah.
So we look at something like the window of tolerance, which is a term as far as, look at my base state, my calm state. And in my calm state is where I'm going to be most sociable, most able to be able to connect with other human beings. Okay. When I go into stress states, whether that be into mobilization into my fight or flight, or whether immobilization down into my freeze, fawn, kind of flop kind of behaviors, as I step out of that window of tolerance, and this can be whether it be a business owner in a state of burnout, teacher in a state of burnout, a caregiver who's experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout, or secondary traumatic stress disorder, or whatever it is. That means they're not in their window of connection. They're in their heightened state of arousal, meaning it's really difficult for them to be able to then connect with them as a human being. So if you've got teachers going, well, they should be connecting with the kids, but if I'm in a heightened state of arousal in fight and flight, and there's so many pressures on me, and I've got this many, outcomes to achieve, well, I'm afraid the first thing that's going to go is my empathy and connection. So it's a bit chicken and egg, whereas actually the empathy and connection would also help them to re-regulate if there wasn't the pressures to kind of hit those targets all the time as well. Because what's the most effective way of soothing a baby from crying? Well, it's not going through a spreadsheet, making sure they've hit their markers. It's giving them a hug. So human connection is vital for re-regulation. But how much time are any human beings currently, getting the opportunity to just really connect? And as you rightly said, with the use of virtual platforms and things like that, that isn't the same nature of it's better than nothing, but it's still not that real key co-connection, physical contact, the absorption of the emotions within that situation that you get with face-to-face meetings and interactions. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with you there. Yeah. Yeah, and I can see how the same thing could apply to, commercial settings or care settings. So
Mm.
I see what you mean, that there's a thread, there is a thread that's going through it all.
People are people, as I said
People are
earlier.
people.
It's one
Yeah.
thing that, I am, entrepreneur and a number of different businesses, as well as the kind of the behavior specialist stuff. And I have to kind of reground myself. I have to make sure I focus an awful lot on self-care and personal well-being and managing my own emotional states to then be okay to make sure I'm there and able to help regulate my staff, connect with my staff. I know if I'm overly stressed, I walk in the office, I don't communicate in the same way, I'll sit down, I'll hyper focus on the work and I'll get the stuff done. But then staff are almost like kind of then disconnected from me. And I want them to feel like, that I'm always approachable, I'm always kind of engaging, supportive, whatever they need me to be in that moment as much as possible. So I have to kind of make sure that I'm doing things. It's important for me to make sure I'm looking after my own emotional well-being, that I'm managing my own expectations related to my outcomes, so that I can walk in and still be approachable, caring, all of my values that we put in as far as a company. I'm working with that kind of, again, I lead by example,
And
caring, approachable and stuff.
that's important for staff to see as well,
Mm,
then that you are the role model, that they look at you as the role model.
yeah.
Which brings me to a question. Do you think there is a lack of skills or awareness in people that this is what's happening, that not everyone's the same all the time? What could influence it? Um, I kind of would class that kind of thing as life skills. And there is a huge lack of life skills that should be. I'm always the one who's ranting a lot about the education system, how outdated it is, and it's so
Mhm.
focused on industrial revolution rather than our modern times of
Yeah.
digital life and all that. The life skills are missing. We need more life skills, like making people aware how people can react or why they might react a certain way, and also how their brain is working, what influences their brains works, not
Mhm.
only what's happening around them, what they put into themselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think, to be self-aware, because if I wasn't self-aware, I wouldn't recognize when I'm potentially getting burnt out or struggling a little bit. And far too many people, we've all done it, where we snap at somebody we care about because we're
Yes.
struggling, whether because we're in pain or whether we're tired or hungry or whatever it is. And we weren't necessarily, in the moment, we weren't aware of it. We
Yeah.
did, but the more you kind of are self-aware, you can pick up and go, I'm in a snappy mood. So what do I need to do to pull me back in? But that ability to be self-aware, I mean, that's something I've, spent however long in a lot of introspection work as far as, trying to understand other people. The only person I've really got to be able to study and micro understand is me and my brain. And then I'll try and extrapolate that out a little bit to kind of then help me to understand anybody else. So that's kind of really been an important part of my journey that I'm still walking every single day. I support myself all the time, Elke, as I'm sure um, but it is that impulse, that self-awareness. I think once upon a time, it used to come so much from my primary caregivers. And I think there's a real danger in society that we've got to put that in somewhere, as you said, whether it should be taught in schools or things like that. But schools kind of think, well, the parents should be doing that. But the parents don't have time to do that. You've got both parents potentially out working, running, doing long days, then they're coming home. They've still got a household to be able to look after, support, bills to pay, food to cook, laundry to do, cleaning to do. But then they're also then encouraged to like engage with their children. But I'm tired. I've done a full 8 hours now. And then this kid's tired because they've done a full day of school and they've got homework that I'm going to sit down and do with them. And I'm stressed about that because I'm really tired from my day. So why do I want to make that a positive, engaging activity? So
Yeah.
kids are not getting the opportunity for the same levels of connection, attachment, co-regulation, empathic narrative, like just helping kids to understand their own emotions. Because it's much easier to tell a kid, just, oh, go on the iPad for a bit, rather than try and really understand why that kid's experience, what are you experiencing. And that's not to be derogatory to any parent, because I'd do the same if I didn't know, because it's just a case of it's quicker and easier to do that because I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Plus the other thing is as well that the parents don't have the skill or the knowledge that like people like us that we have got.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
didn't study all this the things. They don't know psychology, or
Yeah.
they prefer to, listen to what the news tell them, or
Mhm.
get all the conflicting information that's coming out there sometimes. Or, well, parenting isn't taught at schools as well, or
No.
at any other, institutions. You can only kind of learn so much, but there's so much just that's all connected with, you know, how to bring up kids, how to
Mm.
handle, how to interact with other people, what's all involved. That there's a lot of underlying things. It's like the iceberg. Only the bit on the top. You don't know what's below. There is so much that is involved as well, and that's important as well, but that not people don't get taught.
And that's it. And I think because of the way we've society's changed. We used to live. Mum used to be our mum used to be in the house with us, even when we had kids, or they'd be over the road, and sister was down the end of the lane, and we were all very much community based, and so very few parents traditionally, once upon a time, would have raised their kids by themselves. They would have raised their kids with the village or with their family and stuff like that. So they didn't need the education because
Mm.
I think most of us are relying on remembering how we were parented to then be able to parent our kids. But memories are false. Every time we lay down and then we call a memory, we change it every single time. So our memory of how we were parented is not true. We've remembered it completely falsely.
Mm.
So we're relying on our interpretation of how we parented and then trying to apply that to our children. So we're going in essentially, we're making it up from scratch, which is very different from having that nurturing, supportive community around us, helping us to sometimes take that step back. When that kid's acting out, the instinct might be from a parent going, well, I need them to stop straight away. Whereas at least with a grandparent there or a partner there, we can kind of switch it over and kind of go, just take a break. You're stressed out. It's not a kid thing. It's a you thing. Let's just re-regulate and go off and I'll kind of take over and we'll manage it. And I think it's a shame that there isn't more, so schools need to be doing more around that to fill in that gap. Communities need to be doing more about that to fill in that gap. Or people need to listen to podcasts like yours, recognize that, hey, I've got a slight deficit in my knowledge and understanding here. And therefore, what can I do to improve my understanding of myself and the people around me and things like that? And they have to actively seek it out, as you said. And if it's something that interests you, like it did you and I, then you do it. But if it,
Yeah. Or
you
your
know,
podcast as well, by the way.
yeah, absolutely,
It's a
absolutely.
brilliant podcast. Yeah. That all that we don't have the same thing. Yeah, what you're saying, I can relate to that because my mom used to be at home as well. She
Mm,
wasn't working, especially I was the last of four. The youngest. So she wasn't working after I came, and yeah, there was always someone there. That her mum was there. She was pretty much in the picture of looking after me and things as well. So, but
mm,
it reminds me as well of how our I don't know if it's just Western societies that are kind of becoming more fractured with regards to family structure and stuff. Because I look at some of the native peoples. I'm very interested in native wisdom and knowledge of native peoples
mm,
like the Hawaiians or Native Americans, people like that. And there is a lot of emphasis of learning from the elders, like the Hawaiians, the kupuna, the elders. They kind of pass on their knowledge. and that's how they still preserved a lot of their culture and their traditions, despite
Mm,
having been annexed and then integrated into the United States.
yeah.
And I think a lot of that is missing. There's a connection with nature as well, a strong connection with these people, no matter if they
Mm,
are living on Hawaii, which is kind of hard for a lot of them because it's so expensive there, and there's a lot on the mainland now. And but there is still they pass that on to the next generations, their knowledge, their love for the culture, the tradition and things. And I feel we are getting discouraged to do that. And I think that though that's kind of part of what our a population is, the kind of a belonging, a kind of belonging,
mm.
you're part of that.
Yeah, we're always desperately seeking our tribe, typically, which is where you see things like well, whether it be online communities now and things like that, but your football supporters and things like that. We are still a tribal species. I think we're just that we're in too close a proximity to the out group, which makes it confrontational sometimes. So tribes used to war, but now all the tribes are in a very very small amount of space. So the amount of people that we have, if you think about tribes typically would be maximum 150 people or something like that. I think was a maximum. That's why I think even now we usually have our actual circle of influence is typically around 150 people, isn't it? I think that's based on certain primitive tribal connections. So, but now you've got 150 kind of connections interspersed with lots of others. So I think that creates challenges. I think the bit you mentioned there about the lack of being in touch with nature, I think is huge. I think we take it for granted, and we think it's lovely being nice and warm. I much prefer to be inside than outside. But only this week or the last couple of weeks, I've been engaging in the walking challenge or doing more steps and actually walking to work and walking home for probably the first time. I don't think I've walked to and from anywhere kind of habitually since I left school. I used to walk to school before I drove, so I don't think I've walked anywhere. So my whole mentality was I don't have the time. Because it takes me 3 minutes to drive in my car to get where I need to go, but it takes me like 25 minutes to walk there. But do you know what? I have found a significant improvement in my mental well-being just from walking in the morning. And just from taking that time out, there and back, just being in nature, taking a few moments. I spent the other day, I wasn't late for work, but I did spend 2 minutes just watching some swans cross a road. And it, I mean, that's I know more than that's a huge waste of time, but there was something beautiful about it. And then there's a few times since I've been just stepping outside of my house, not just being in a building, that I've noticed things that I've recognized and acknowledged. I would have missed that. I would have missed that if I'd been driving. I wouldn't have seen that. And I think that's something we as humans take for granted. That's something I definitely think is something we're not encouraging children to do enough more. They're spending far too much time inside. So yeah, that in touch with nature, the sense of community you mentioned there, tribally. I think there's so much around the respecting elders a little bit, or connection or learning from elders at the very least, as well as a higher level of spirituality as well. And I'm not a spiritual person so much as I'm a hyper skeptic. I am a scientist. I have no belief in any rule whatsoever. So unless there is significant evidence, I tend to be agnostic towards most things.
But you don't have to be, you can be spiritual, but you don't need to be
yeah,
religious.
absolutely.
There's a difference. I see a difference between spirituality and religion.
Me too.
Religion is more like a dogma and some
Yeah.
sort of dogma ideology thinking behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas spirituality, you're just connecting with energy, with nature, with I
Mm-hmm.
think that's all part of that as well. You don't need to
Yeah.
kind of be part of any kind of religion to be
No,
spiritual.
100%. Yeah. And I was kind of keeping it separate. I think it's just I don't need to believe in any woo-woo. I don't need to believe in anything that I perceive as made up for me to feel spiritual. I think I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not a religious person in the slightest, and I don't engage in pseudoscience. I'm no woo-woo-y, but I'm incredibly spiritual. You know, I can look at a landscape and see the mountains in the distance and feel that same sense of awe, and just that moment, or watch a beautiful sunrise and be, you know, have a moment of calm and connection from that 100%. That's not woo-woo.
Yeah.
That's just wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're coming close to the end of the podcast, but I would like you to speak a little bit about your book, about your targeting the positive.
Well, I'll never say no to that, Elke. I'm a shameless self-publicist, so yeah. Yeah, what would you like to know?
I haven't read the book yet.
That's
So
okay. I like the yet,
why
so
do
Elke,
I
that's
have
good.
why is it a must read for me?
Well, this is the first, and hopefully there will be more books coming. As I said, I've been studying human behavior for 18, 19 years, been fascinated with it for much longer than that, and accumulation of life experiences and learning has kind of taken me to this book. It's predominantly focused towards the health and social care sector and education. So it's for those who are looking after other people predominantly. So it is working with children or adults. But the hope is I'm going to be doing a parenting version. I'm going to be doing a more organizational, like corporate version as well, of the philosophies. And it's taking all of these things that everybody separated out and putting it into kind of the one common concept as far as so there's a principle in there called the six-stage target model, and the six-stage target model is just an analytical process that I can either use on somebody else to help me to understand their behavior and help work with them to improve their outcomes, or I can use it on myself as a self-evaluation tool to better understand myself and create strategies for how I'm going to improve my outcomes. So the target is kind of positive outcomes for all. So it kind of looks at, say, what we maybe already do. Or, you know, I don't think there's anything magical that I've created or anything I would say on stand on the shoulder of giants. You know, it's taking other ideas, but it's looking at, we're making sure we're self-aware of what behavior we're engaging with. We then explore and be curious about our own behavior. Well, why did I do that? Why do I react like that? Is that based on my values, beliefs, and attitudes, or is it something based in fact? You know, and looking at a cost-benefit analysis, and then try to then look at a proactive plan. Well, how can I improve that? How can I help to find a better strategy to manage my stress or to meet my need that's more adaptive rather than maladaptive? Looking at a lot of introspection work and self-awareness and emotional literacy, and then learn to, my fundamental rule for anybody is learning to better respond rather than react. Because most of the time when we have confrontations, when we have difficulties, when we get overwhelmed, it's because we are reacting rather than responding. And taking that pause and that self-reflection and having those strategies is so important that we built in advance. But then we're going to make mistakes, and therefore after every situation there's an opportunity for learning. You know, mistakes are stepping stones in learning. As long as you've got that growth mindset, that doesn't mean you're not good enough. It means that, hey, there's always room for improvement. You're wonderful just the way you are, but you can still get better. And so that means either a personal journey or to better understand those around you, and work with them to improve their outcomes as well. For those who are listening, whether that be, you know, somebody, if you've got a loved one living with dementia, whether you've got somebody who, you know, a child with neurodiversity, or, you know, on the autistic spectrum, for instance, or whatever it is looking at it in a very specific way. And we focus, one of the things that we try and do is we focus on the skills a person already has, and we build on those and reinforce them, rather than focusing on the maybe what we perceive as deficits that we feel they're missing. So rather than focusing on, you know, how can I stop him being rude, it's, well, how can I work with him and encourage him to be respectful? So everything's all about shifting over to a positive focus, which is just, I'd much rather catch a kid being good 7 times than bad once. So
I think, yeah, I can see how this book can both benefit me and others. I consider myself a lifelong learner.
Mm,
I've never stopped learning until, I leave the physical body, and then I'll probably move to somewhere else. At least my
mm,
soul will. And no, it's a great book, and it's a very important book for even more for those to have who are working in the care sector, education sector, looking after other people and making sure that they're well.
mm.
Is there any other resources, sources that you would like to mention? Where can people find you?
Well, you've already mentioned obviously the Able to Care podcast, which is there for paid and unpaid caregivers, teachers, and parents to better understand those they support as well as themselves. Obviously, that's a full resource that's on all platforms. So while they're already listening to your podcast, they can just do a little search, and after they finish listening to you, they can pop on over to mine and have a little listen as well. Also, training wise, Able Training Support Limited is my company that delivers training across the UK to schools and care homes, foster parents. As you mentioned, we are the external training organisation of the Alzheimer's Society, so we do a lot of work around that area. And then I also do like business mentoring and kind of life support and stuff like that, mainly for business owners and entrepreneurs. So that's andybaker.xyz is my website around that. So welcome to kind of check out. But otherwise, I'll hold up my book because the cover's really nice. To kind of go,
Cheers.
or just go on Amazon and buy my book, Targeting the Positive, and or pass it on to somebody you think could benefit. And that's it. Yeah. But reach out. Anybody got any questions? Just reach out to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on to Exploring Brain and Mind today, Andy Baker. I really, really appreciate your time, and well, maybe I might ask you to come on again because you've got such a wide spectrum of things that could be useful for people to, about behavior, about care sector, people
Hmm.
with dementia, people in education. So
Yeah.
keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears peeled, people. He might be back at some point. Thank you so much, Andy Baker.
My pleasure.